So good morning again. This morning we take the gospel message from the readings and writings of Matthew, the second chapter of the first 12 verses. We heard them read to us in the very beginning. And I thought it was interesting that we would choose this version of the gospel because it talks in truth to those who came at first to witness the Messiah, the Savior of the world. They were known as wise men, Magi, kings. Today is a day of recognition. The word Epiphany comes to us from the New Testament Greek word Epiphania, meaning manifestation or striking appearance. And I would say to you that as Mary and the infant son received the gifts of the kings, that would be a very striking situation to them and all who were around. Because it recognized not only the birth of the Christ child, but to recognize him as the Messiah, as the Savior. In the Western community, there is a practice of the Feast of Epiphany, which commemorates principally the visit of the Magi, or the wise men, to the Christ child. But what it does more than that, it reveals to the world that God came not only for the Jews, but also for the Gentiles. And thus we see the good news meaning for the world in general, and not just for the specific. Jesus was born. Wise men came to look for him, probably from an area that we would understand this day as Iraq or Iran, Saudi Arabia, or even Yemen. And although they often called them three kings, the Bible is not clear of how many actually came. The reading this morning said a band of wise men came. Three is only a guess because they came with them three gifts. They were definitely men of great learning. The word Magi comes from the Greek word magos, which in our word became magic. Magos itself comes from an old Persian word that would be a title that was given to the priests of their religious sect in those areas. Today, we would call them astrologers, but at their time, astronomy and astrology were hand in hand the same science. The Magi would have followed the stars faithfully to see that all of a sudden, out of the sky, God places a unique star before them, and they would follow that faithfully. They would have been very rich men, held in very high esteem in their own communities by people that were in their country and the surrounding countries. They had seen an unusual new star in the sky at those times, and it told the truth and prophesied the birth of a very special king. No one actually knows what star it was that they saw in the night. Many speculations over the years by those of learned positions that maybe it was a comet, maybe it was a supernova, maybe it was a conjunction of the planets, or even something supernatural. According to the legend, the Magi's name were Melchior, king of Arabia, who presented the gift of gold; Gaspar, the king of Sheba, who presented the baby Jesus with a gift of frankincense; and Balthazar, who was the king of Egypt, who then presented the gift of myrrh. There is a legend, however, that there was a fourth wise man, one known as Artaban. Artaban was a Persian king, far, far away from the other kings. He would have studied the planets, and it would have been the stars, just as the other three, that led him to the birth of the King of Kings. It was said that Artaban sold all that he had to purchase a large sapphire, blue as a fragment of night light, flawless rubies, that render a ray of sunshine, and a lustrous pearl, pure as the peak of a snow mountain at twilight. He intended to carry these three items of his treasure to be a tribute to the King of Kings. And so, on his own, he set out for Jerusalem to arrange a meeting with the other three kings already on their way from the Middle East, all together to find the newborn king. So allow me to introduce myself to you this morning. I am Artaban, and after many, many weeks of difficult travel and frustrating delays, I came across a Jewish man lying on the side of the road suffering from a deadly fever. The man called out to me. He reached out to me and called for me, begging for help. I was hesitant, as you might guess. If I stop to minister to this dying stranger, surely I will miss the meeting with my friends. But if I leave now, the man would certainly die. What choice did I really have? And so I stayed with the sick man, caring for him and nursing him back to health. And I left him with all that I had left of my bread, wine, and my store of healing herbs. And his response to me was, "I have nothing to give to you in return," said the grateful man, "only this. Our prophets have foretold that a Messiah will be born in Bethlehem, not in Jerusalem. May the Lord bring you safely to that place, because you have had pity upon the sick." And I reached a place where I was to meet Melchior, Gaspar, and Balthazar, to realize that they had already left, leaving a note for me: "We can delay no longer. We'll meet you on the other side of the desert." And so I returned then back to Babylon, sold the sapphire to buy a train of camels and provisions for my journey. When I arrived at Bethlehem, I only had the two treasures left, the pearl and the ruby. But it was 3 whole days after the other wise men had found Mary, Joseph, and the child, Jesus. And they had given their gifts of gold and frankincense and myrrh to the Christ King. While seeking them out, a woman came out of a small house near me, and she told me that Joseph had taken Mary and their child and fled secretly that very night. King Herod was killing the male children because Herod was afraid that the promised king would claim his throne. And as she spoke, there was an uproar in the streets as Herod's soldiers searched each house to kill any male child under the age of 3. And the terrified young mother, fearful for the fate of her own child, begged me for help. What was I to do? Quickly, I rushed to the doorway, held out the ruby to the soldiers. They snatched it eagerly. And then the sergeant of their guard said, "Move on. There are no children in this home." With a sigh, I realized that now my 3 gifts were down to 1 gift. I'll never be worthy enough to worship the sight of the king. But the woman had stopped weeping, because she said to me, "You have saved the life of my little one. May the Lord bless you, keep you, and give you peace." My journey continued on for 33 years in search of the young family from Bethlehem. But by now I was tired, old, worn, weary. And I became ill, and I knew that my time was near. I still sought the king child. But finally, on my way home, I returned to Jerusalem for the last time. And I turned my caravan towards home. And there was talk of a great person who had been put to death that very day. And hearing of his life and teachings, I realized that this indeed was my king. In great panic, I made my way to Golgotha, hoping that the pearl of great value could possibly buy the release of the King of Kings. But just as I came across a troop of soldiers marching down the street, they were dragging a young girl in chains. When they passed by, the young girl called out to me, "Sir, have pity on me. Save me. My father's debt has caused me to be thrown into slavery." I knew immediately what I must do. So I took the pearl from my coat pocket. I'd never seen it look so luminous, so radiant. Nevertheless, I exchanged it for the girl's freedom. Then, no sooner than I had paid the debt for the young girl's release than the things went from bad to worse. Go figure. Left without any of my treasures that I had brought for the King of Kings. Suddenly, the skies went unnaturally dark, and a violent earthquake shook the city, and a flying tile came down and hit me in the head. And I dropped, half conscious, to the ground. And the young girl pillowed my head in her lap, and I mustered a small, weak voice to someone no one else could see. "Lord, can that be you?" And then my questions flowed as a response to this presence. When did I see you hungry and feed you, or thirsty and gave you something to drink? When did you come as a stranger to my door, and I welcomed you in? When did you come to me naked and I clothed you? When did I see you sick or in prison and visited you? For 33 years I have sought you, but I have never seen your face nor ministered to you, my King. And then, according to the legend, like a whisper from a faraway place, came a low, sweet voice. "Truly I say to you, inasmuch as you have done these things for the least of my brothers and sisters, you will have done all these things for me." And then, with the last breath, I smiled in death, because I knew that the King had intended and received the gifts that I had brought to him. My story has gone down in history as a legend. But what about yours? Will your story become a legend at a glorious end, resting with your Savior? I pray it so. All the children say,
Amen.
Amen.